The wind blew hard across the wide land, rolling over the tall grass and whispering through the cedar trees like voices from spirits older than any tribe or settlement. The sky had a pale gold look near the horizon, painted by the last breath of evening. A lonely horse stood tied near a bend of thorny brush, its ears twitching at every faint sound. No gunshots, no cattle bells, no wagon wheels. Only the sound of the wind and the beating heart of a land that had seen both peace and war. Somewhere far away, a wolf gave its sharp cry, though no one could tell if it was calling for company or warning someone who had wandered into the wrong place. A young woman lay in that wilderness, frightened and confused, still trying to understand how her life had changed in only a handful of days. She grew up far from this land, near a dusty town where people spoke in whispers whenever the tribes rode close. Every porch had rifles, every barn had secrets, and every family prayed that danger stayed on the other side of the river. She never imagined she would cross it herself. Her dress was torn near the bottom from the long ride, her shoes covered with dirt from rocky paths, and her hands shook not because of the cold, but because of the unknown. She had heard many stories about warriors of the western tribes. Some people called them ruthless, others spoke of honor and sacred vows. She never knew which version to believe, and now she feared she would find out in the harshest way. The moment she was brought into the Apache camp, every eye turned to her, not with cruelty, but like they were trying to understand why fate had guided her there. Some of the women looked at her with worry, others with quiet sympathy, as if they already knew how heavy her heart felt. She had been told only that a decision was made for her, and she could not return to the life she once knew. The place where she had shared bread with neighbors and dreamed of marrying someone gentle who raised horses and built a cabin under a warm sky. Those dreams now felt like smoke drifting away. Then he appeared, stepping out from behind a tall hide-covered shelter, carrying himself with the strength of someone who had seen battles, storms, loss, and duty. His long, dark hair brushed his shoulders, and his eyes held the solemn weight of a man chosen for responsibility, not for pleasure. He did not smile, nor did he offer harsh words. There was only a steady silence in him, like a mountain that never trembled, even while lightning cracked above. When he first looked at her, she felt something stronger than fear, something neither hostile nor friendly. It was like he was studying the meaning of her presence rather than her face. He signaled for the others to leave, and slowly they stepped back, watching with curiosity, but also respect. The fire crackled between them, throwing shadows that danced like spirits on the ground. She felt trapped, unsure if she should stand, kneel, speak, or stay silent. Her voice trembled when she asked why she was there, but no answer came at first. He walked around her once, slow and measured, as though trying to understand how a stranger had suddenly become part of his life. When he finally knelt near her, she felt her heart race, not knowing if he was her guard, her captor, or her only chance for safety. His voice was deep, calm, and strong when he finally spoke. He told her she had been brought there because others believed she was meant to stand beside him. He said that destiny was written long before any of them were born, and that she was not a prisoner nor a servant, but someone chosen by the winds that guided both tribes and settlers. Yet she did not believe him. She thought of her old life, of everything familiar, of the simple dreams she never got to complete. She raised her voice slightly, trying to sound brave but feeling helpless inside, and asked what he expected from her. He did not raise his hand, did not force her closer, did not speak like a man hungry for power. Instead, he answered her in a way that surprised her more than anything she feared. He told her that although others believed she was given to him, he did not want fear, he wanted trust, and trust could not be ordered. It made no sense to her. She had seen nothing in this land that promised kindness, yet his eyes held no wicked intention. Still, her heart was not ready to believe. The western night felt too wide, too strange, too unforgiving. Her thoughts spun like leaves inside a storm, and she wondered if he was only speaking gently to calm her before revealing a darker truth. He slowly placed his hand near the fire and lifted a piece of burning wood, letting sparks fly into the air. He said that every flame needed fuel to survive, but if someone forced it too hard, it would die and leave nothing but cold ash. Then he looked at her again with that same steady gaze and repeated that he did not want fear to be the first thing built between them. He wanted something that could stay through storms, hunger, and time. The wind picked up, shaking the thin hide walls, and she looked away, fighting tears that burned like salt. Her life had changed without her consent, her future rewritten by people she hardly knew. All she had was instinct, and instinct kept whispering that she must not trust too quickly, no matter how calm his voice sounded. Still, one thought kept creeping into her mind, something she did not want to admit. She could see no cruelty in him. Not yet. As the fire continued to crackle and shadows danced, he ended his words with a promise. He told her that if she chose not to trust him, he would not force her path, and he would stand guard until she understood that not every story whispered by fearful towns was true. She wanted to believe him, but belief is never born in a single moment. It grows or it breaks. The night grew colder, and the camp waited not far away, certain that fate had already spoken for them. She looked at the warrior again, wondering whether destiny had brought her into danger, protection, or something she could not name. She felt trapped between the world she had known and a future too, clear to embrace. And while the moon climbed higher and the land grew darker, only one question filled her mind. Was he truly the man who would protect her, or the man she should run from before dawn? The woman sat close to the fire, keeping her distance, even though there was plenty of space between them. She tried to wrap her arms around herself for comfort, but nothing felt warm. Not even the flames that should have eased the cold creeping across her skin. Her heart still beat so loud that she wondered if he could hear it in the quiet night. She wanted to ask 100 questions, yet every word stayed trapped inside her throat like stones she could not swallow. The Apache warrior remained steady, not speaking unless necessary, and the silence between them felt heavier than any chain. She studied him carefully, trying to understand who he really was. His clothing was simple and made from tanned hide, marked with symbols carved or pressed by hand. She could smell smoke mixed with earth and cedar on him. It's the scent of a man who spent more time under the open sky than near any town street. His hands were rough and scarred, speaking of years of battles or harsh labor. Yet his face did not show cruelty, only a quiet weight that she did not know how to read. She wondered if he even wanted her there, or if he was just following orders from elders she had never met. She remembered when she was taken from the town, how a group of armed men entered the place where she worked, telling her that her fate would bring peace between two sides. They never explained how or why. One said she should feel honored, another told her not to make trouble, and a third avoided her eyes completely, as if he felt guilty but had no power to change what had been decided. She tried to resist, but there were too many, and she was too helpless. She hoped that someone from the town would come search for her, but deep down, she already knew most people were too afraid of the tribe to cross their territory. As she sat near the fire, she began to notice the sounds of the camp. Some voices spoke in low tones, carrying words she could not understand. There were children somewhere nearby, laughing softly as if unaware of the trouble adults created. A few dogs walked close, sniffing around, but not barking. Horses were tied near the small hill, moving gently, to calm for a place she thought would be dangerous. She expected loud, drunken behavior or threats, but instead the night felt controlled, organized, and filled with unspoken rules. The warrior finally moved, and she felt her muscles tighten as if bracing for something. He stood, walked away from the fire, and picked up a folded woven blanket from a log. When he returned, he placed it near her, but not too close. He said she should not sleep cold, and then stepped back to his original place. She hesitated, thinking it might be a trick or a test. But in the end, she pulled the blanket toward her for survival more than comfort. She wondered why he cared if she shivered, especially when everyone told her she was brought there to belong to him. She watched him lower himself onto the ground again. Not too far yet, still leaving a respectful space. His movements were slow and thoughtful, not rushed or demanding. He stared into the fire the same way an old soldier might stare at the past, seeing things others could not. She wanted to speak, but feared her voice would tremble. Still, curiosity pushed her, She asked him why the others believed she was meant for him. He did not answer right away. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment, as if deciding whether she should know everything or only part. Finally, he told her that the elders believed fate showed signs through dreams, storms, and paths people accidentally crossed. He said that a dream was told by one of the oldest women in the tribe, where a stranger from another world would appear, bringing change. When the men found her, they believed the sign was complete. She whispered that she never asked for such a destiny and never wanted it. He nodded, saying destiny rarely asks permission. She looked down, feeling both anger and sadness, wishing her life had stayed simple and controlled by her own decisions. She asked if he believed in the prophecy or if he was only following what others expected from him. He did not answer quickly. His voice was low when he finally replied that belief was not the same as obedience, and that he was still trying to understand what part of the prophecy belonged to her and what part belonged to him. He told her that long ago he was given a different path. He was raised not only as a warrior, but also as someone who must protect those who could not protect themselves. He said battles stained his hands but not his heart, because he never harmed anyone without reason. She listened quietly, trying to find truth in his tone instead of his words. He said he had experienced loss and sacrifice like many others, and he was not looking for power through her, nor was he seeking to claim something without mutual choice. His words surprised her again, because they did not match the rumors she grew up hearing. She slowly asked if she would ever be allowed to return home. He inhaled deeply, and she prepared herself for a painful answer. He said that the land between the tribe and the settlers was filled with danger and mistrust. He told her that even if he took her back, there was no guarantee her town would welcome her again. Many would believe she had chosen the tribe or been changed by them. Some would look at her like a traitor. Others might use her story to stir hate instead of peace. She felt her breath shorten, realizing how quickly life could shift into a path with no easy return. He added that she was not a prisoner, but the outside world saw divisions that were difficult to cross. He asked her if she truly believed she had been living free before, or if she had only been following the expectations of those who frightened her with stories. His questions struck her harder than she expected. She realized she did not know how to answer, because her life had always been shaped by warnings, rules, and fear of unknown people. The fire burned lower as night deepened, and more stars appeared in the enormous sky. He stood again, saying he needed to speak with one of the elders. He told her not to run, not because he would chase her, because the land outside the camp held dangers that did not offer mercy. She watched him walk away with calm steps, disappearing behind a large shelter, now alone by the fire. She tried to decide whether she was safer inside the camp or outside under the threat of wild land. Animals and men with no laws. She thought of everything she once believed about the world and felt confused, like she no longer knew what was truth. She listened to the wind and tried to steady her breath. But questions kept rising, one after another. Each one without answer. She wondered if destiny was real, or if her life had become tangled in someone else's vision. She wondered if trust could ever form between two people forced into the same path. She wondered if she would ever learn the truth behind the prophecy, or if it was only a story used to control her fate. She wondered what kind of leader he truly was when no eyes watched him and no voices repeated legends. And as she sat there under a cold western sky, one silent thought echoed inside her, like a whisper from the wind. Should she begin to trust the warrior's words, or prepare for the moment she needed to escape before dawn? The fire burned low, sending thin lines of smoke into the night sky, and the woman tried to keep her breathing steady as shadows moved around the camp. She could still see the place where the warrior had walked off, but he had not returned. She felt trapped between fear and curiosity, unable to rest and to drain to think clearly. The blanket around her shoulders felt heavy, not because of its weight, but because of the strange comfort it offered, a comfort she did not know if she could trust. The night carried unfamiliar sounds, some soft like humming from distant shelters, others sharp like a stick snapping under a foot. Every noise made her tense up. She wondered how long she would be able to endure not knowing who wanted her there and why. the warrior had left her with promises, not threats, and that alone confused her more. She had grown up believing the tribe cared for nothing but the strength of their own people. Yet here she was, sitting alone by a fire with no guard watching over her, no chains, no orders. If she wanted, she could stand and run into the dark right now. She looked toward the open plains and the thin line of trees. The path into the night looked endless. She imagined the dangers waiting out there, but part of her still wondered if facing the unknown might be better than staying in a place where her future was written by others. The hesitation held her down like a hand on her shoulder. She pulled the blanket tighter, wishing she could hear something familiar, like the church bell from her town, or the voice of a friend telling her everything would be fine. Instead, she only had the crackling fire and the quiet breath of the wind. A few children's steps stopped nearby, making her tense until she saw a small girl peeking from behind a wooden post. The girl held a clay cup in her hand and studied her with wide, curious eyes. When the girl finally stepped forward, she extended the cup gently. The woman hesitated, but the child's face was too pure to fear. She reached out slowly and took it. It was warm broth, with bits of herbs floating on top. She thanked the girl softly, though the child might not understand her language. The girl only smiled shyly and ran back toward one of the shelters. Drinking the warm broth eased her stomach and calmed her trembling hands. Yet it also deepened her confusion. Why show kindness to a stranger forced into the camp? Why offer comfort if she was meant to be nothing more than an obligation or symbol of peace? She looked around again, noticing how some of the tribe watched her from a distance. Their expressions were not hostile, only cautious. It was as if they were trying to determine whether she was a threat or a blessing they had not expected. As she finished the drink, she heard two voices approaching. The warrior returned, walking with an older man whose steps were slow but firm. The old man's face was marked with lines that told of long years under sun and hardship. His eyes were deep, holding the weight of someone who had seen generations come and go. He studied her with a look that was not unkind, but carried an authority she could not ignore. The warrior spoke to him in a low voice, too soft for her to understand. The elder nodded, then knelt near the fire. The elder spoke in her language more clearly than she expected. His accent was strong, but his words carried meaning. He told her the tribe stood at a difficult crossroads. Tension between the settlers and the tribe had grown, not because of war but because of broken agreements and mistrust on both sides. The dream he had spoken of, the prophecy the warrior mentioned, was not meant to bind her without choice. It was meant to warn that change was near and that a stranger might guide them toward peace or danger. She asked how she could possibly affect peace between entire lands. She was just one woman, with no power or influence. The elder replied that sometimes a single person carried more weight than armies, not because of strength but because of the path they took. His words made her uneasy. She felt the responsibility pressed down on her, something far heavier than fear. She asked why she was chosen instead of someone else. The elder said the signs pointed to her, though he did not explain how or why. She began to suspect that the prophecy was not as clear as they believed. Maybe they saw meaning in her arrival because they desperately needed one. She wondered if she was simply a solution born from fear. The warrior watched her closely but did not interrupt. His eyes showed calm understanding, but also something more complicated, something he was not yet sharing. She asked the elder if she would be allowed to leave someday. The elder did not give a yes or no. Instead, he said her path would depend on choices still unfolding. She felt a sudden frustration rise inside her. Everyone spoke of fate and destiny, yet no one gave her a clear answer. She had lost her freedom because strangers read signs she never agreed to. As the elder rose and walked away, she noticed the warrior remained still, as if waiting for her to speak. She asked him why he didn't argue with the elder, why he didn't say she should be free to choose her future. He replied that choice had always belonged to her, but choices came with consequences that stretched far beyond a single person. He told her that if she fled into the Darklands tonight, he would not chase her. But if she stayed, her life would be tied to paths that could either heal or divide two worlds. His honesty unsettled her, because he did not hide from the truth or soften it. Before she could answer, a sudden shout rose from the far end of the camp. Torches flickered, and several warriors gathered quickly. The woman stood up in alarm, searching for a threat. The warrior lifted a hand, signaling her to stay still. He walked toward the commotion with calm but urgent steps. She hesitated, then followed a few paces behind. She saw a group of riders approaching the camp. Not from the settlers' land, but from another tribe known for their fierce independence. Their leader dismounted with hard eyes and demanded to speak with the elder. The air shifted at once. Voices grew sharper, the camp stirred restlessly, and the tension thickened like rising smoke. The rival tribe accused the Apache of breaking boundaries, claiming every tribe should decide their own fate, not follow dreams or signs from elders. They questioned the presence of the woman, asking why a settler was brought into decisions that affected their land too. The accusation carried anger that spread across the camp like lightning. The woman felt eyes turning toward her again, this time filled with suspicion. She stepped back, heart racing. She heard words directed at the warrior, blaming him for stirring conflict by accepting a prophecy without considering its effect on others. She watched him stand tall and firm, not raising his voice, only stating that the woman was not an object or a trophy, and that no tribe had the right to claim her fate but her own. His defense surprised her, and for a moment she saw how heavy his role truly was. The rival leader argued that bringing a settler woman into tribal affairs was reckless and could ignite. The elder responded with strong, measured words, saying the dream was clear and that danger would rise if the sign was ignored. The argument grew louder, and the woman felt fear creeping into her bones. She did not want to be the cause of a battle between tribes. She did not want her presence to bring more bloodshed into a land already scarred by too much loss. As the warriors pressed in and voices sharpened, she saw the rival leader glance at her with cold eyes. His gaze held threat, not curiosity. She felt the warrior shift slightly, as if placing himself subtly between her and danger. The simple gesture made her heartbeat quicken in confusion. She heard words she didn't fully understand, but the tone carried warning. Some argued she should be sent back to her people before things grew worse. Others insisted her arrival was part of a truth that could not be undone. The night grew heavier with every passing moment, and the sky felt too tight, as if listening to every word. She sensed the tension building, ready to snap like a rope stretched too far. She felt caught in the center of something she had never asked for, something larger and more dangerous than any of her fears. And as the two tribes stared each other down, with her fate hanging in the balance, she realized the true conflict was only beginning. The moment the rival rider's voice rose through the camp, the woman felt her whole body tighten, as if the air itself had turned into a trap. Men stood with their hands on weapons, not pointing them yet, but close enough to show how fast things could turn. The warrior who had spoken calmly to her earlier no longer carried the same stillness. His shoulders were tense, his jaw set hard, and his eyes followed every movement of the rival group. The elder tried to keep order, but fear and suspicion spread too quickly among both sides. She felt as though the ground under her feet was no longer steady, as if one wrong step could send everything into chaos. The rival leader spoke again, louder, pointing in her direction with a sharp gesture. She could not understand the words, but she didn't need to. The meaning was clear in the tone of his voice. He blamed her, not for a crime, but for the disruption of an order that tribes protected with their lives. He said her presence was a bad sign, a warning that settlers would soon try to push deeper into tribal lands. The elder denied it firmly, saying she was not a threat, but a part of the prophecy, a path shown to them by the spirits. The rival riders did not agree, and their distrust grew with each exchange. She saw the warrior step forward, raising his voice just enough to halt the argument. His tone was not angry, but strong enough to command silence. He declared that she was under the protection of their camp, and that no tribe had the right to take her or harm her. His voice carried across the night, and even the children who had wandered too close were pulled back by their mothers. The rival leader narrowed his eyes at him, seeing the confidence and strength he carried. The woman sensed a history between them, something unspoken but deep, like a wound that never fully healed. The rival leader's men whispered among themselves, glancing between the warrior and the elder. She began to understand that this was more than a disagreement about her fate. There were tensions between tribes, old rivalries and power struggles that her presence had unexpectedly stirred. She felt a tightness in her chest, worrying that no matter what choice she made, conflict would follow. She feared that people might get hurt because she had been brought here. Against her will, the elder raised his staff and demanded calm, stating that the prophecy spoke of unity, not division. He insisted the dream was clear, that a stranger would appear just before the land reached a breaking point. The rival leader countered that dreams could be misread and signs could be twisted. He said perhaps the dream was a warning against outsiders, not a welcome for them. She felt like nothing more than a tool in a debate that no one fully understood. The warrior stood his ground, his eyes fixed on the rival leader. There was no shouting, no wild words, just a quiet tension that felt like two storms meeting. The rival leader finally called for silence and turned away from her to speak privately with his men. She watched the groups whisper, some gesturing with frustration, others looking toward the plains as if weighing whether to leave or strike. Every heartbeat felt heavier. The warrior returned to her side, telling her softly not to be afraid. She wanted to believe him, but fear was already rooted deep. He told her he needed her to trust him now, more than ever, even if trust felt impossible. She asked him what they planned to do with her, but he looked away toward the rival leader and admitted he did not know yet. He said the arguments happening now could shape the future of every tribe and settlement in the region. She felt small and powerless, swept into a place where decisions came from forces far bigger than her own life. A sudden voice rose from the rival group, a younger man shouting angrily. The elder struck his staff against the ground to quiet them, but the tension only grew sharper. The rival leader pointed again, challenging the Apache warrior directly. The warrior stiffened, then stepped forward with controlled force. She felt her breath freeze. This was no longer a simple dispute. This was turning personal. The rival leader accused him of bending tradition for his own benefit, that taking a settler woman into the camp was a selfish act disguised as destiny. The warrior fired back that he followed the elders, not ambition. The rival leader scoffed and said the prophecy was a convenient excuse. The woman could feel something deeper cutting between them. She saw the way their eyes locked, full of history and resentment, as if they had once stood on the same side and now stood on ground ready to split beneath them. The warrior stepped closer, his voice low but steady. He told the rival leader that if there was a challenge to be made, it should be made directly and not through threats toward a woman who had no part in tribal politics. His words were both protective and firm, a shield placed between her and danger. The rival leader took a slow breath, then announced that if the prophecy was true, the spirits would show it. But if it was a mistake, then the tribe should not gamble their safety on a stranger. He demanded a trial of truth, a test that would reveal whether she was meant to be there or whether fate had been misread. The camp reacted immediately. Some murmured with excitement, others with fear. The elder looked troubled, clearly not wanting matters to escalate into sacred tests that were used only in desperate times. The woman had no idea what a trial of truth meant, but the warrior's eyes darkened with concern. She asked him quietly what the trial involved, but he did not answer. His silence frightened her far more than any explanation could have. The rival leader pressed the elder for a decision. The elder hesitated, then reluctantly agreed that the trial would take place at first light. The warrior shook his head in frustration, but he did not argue with the elder's final word. The woman felt her stomach twist with dread. She asked again what the trial meant. But this time, the warrior gently took her arm and led her away from the crowd. Out of earshot, once they reached a quieter corner of the camp, he finally spoke. He said the trial of truth was an old tradition, one rarely seen anymore. It involved signs, choices, and the spirit of the land itself. It was meant to reveal whether someone was meant to join the tribe or whether the land rejected them. He warned her that the rival tribe hoped the trial would fail, giving them reason to blame her and undermine the elder. She asked what would happen if she failed, but his silence returned, and that alone gave her all the answers she needed. He told her he would not let harm come to her, no matter what the trial revealed. She looked into his eyes, searching for certainty, but she could see only tension mixed with determination. He He said he would stand beside her through the entire trial, even if it meant standing against the rival tribe. She felt tears gather, not from fear alone, but from the weight of being pulled into a world where every step felt dangerous. She whispered that she never asked for any of this. He nodded and said he knew, and that was why he was fighting so hard to protect her. Before she could say more, the elder approached, leaning heavily on his staff. He told the warrior to prepare and told her to rest, though rest felt impossible. She watched the rival tribe gather their horses and supplies as they prepared for the morning. The camp buzzed with whispers and fearful glances. Children were pulled inside shelters, and warriors sharpened blades, not for battle but for ceremony. The woman remained close to the fire, staring at the flames and wondering how a single path had carried her so far from home. She feared the trial, she feared the rival tribe, and she feared the weight of destiny that people whispered about. But more than anything, she feared the possibility that she might fail and bring danger upon the warrior who had chosen to protect her. As the night grew darker, and the camp settled into uneasy silence, she realized the next sunrise would decide far more than her place in the tribe. It would shape the fate of two worlds already on the edge of breaking. And as she looked toward the distant mountains, the wind carried a cold warning. The storm waiting at dawn was not one she could outrun. The night before the trial felt longer than any she had ever lived. She stayed by the fire, barely blinking, afraid that sleep would steal away whatever courage she still had. The warrior did not sleep either. He walked around the camp, speaking with no one, thinking as if each step carried the weight of two worlds. When dawn finally touched the horizon with a pale light, she felt her heart pound like hooves on a wooden bridge. The tribe began to gather quietly, their movements respectful and serious. No one celebrated, no one whispered foolish predictions. This was a moment tied to their land, history, and beliefs. And even the wind seemed to wait. The elder walked to her with a calm, steady look. He placed his hand on her shoulder and told her to breathe deeply and remember she was not alone. She nodded, though fear still pressed against her chest. The warrior came to stand beside her, not touching her, but close enough for her to feel supported. She wished she could read his thoughts, but his eyes held both strength and worry. Together they walked toward the open ground where the trial would take place. The rival tribe stood across the field, watching sharply, clearly expecting failure. The camp formed a wide circle, and the elder raised his staff high, so that the first rays of sunlight touched its carved top. He explained the trial in a quiet but firm voice. The test was not one of strength, force, or suffering. It was a trial of truth, intention, and inner spirit. The land, the wind, and the fire would decide, not men. The woman was handed a small pouch filled with sacred dust collected from 3 different places within the territory. She was told to carry it to a marked stone at the edge of a nearby hill without spilling a single grain. The path was uneven, narrow, and full of loose earth. The meaning was clear. If her heart carried fear or anger, she would fail. If she walked with truth and peace, the path would allow her to pass. She took the pouch with shaking hands. The warrior stepped closer and whispered that she should not look back, no matter what she heard or felt. She nodded and took her first slow step. The crowd watched in silent anticipation. The warrior stood tall and still, though his eyes never left her. The rival leader crossed his arms, waiting for weakness to show. The woman reached the beginning of the narrow path, took a deep breath, and walked forward. Each step tested her balance, not just on the dirt, but inside her heart. She thought of her old life, her dreams, and how fear had ruled most of her decisions. She thought of everything she never understood about this new world. She thought of the warrior who had protected her even when others doubted her presence. She thought of the prophecy and wondered whether it mattered how she came here or only what she became afterward. Halfway up the hill, a gust of wind blew hard against her. Her hands trembled as she tightened her grip, trying not to let the pouch tilt. She heard murmurs from below, but she kept her eyes straight ahead. She remembered his words, "Never look back." She steadied her breath and took another step. The wind grew stronger, or maybe her fear did, but she kept walking. When the ground slid slightly beneath her feet, she knelt to regain balance. She felt tears threaten her eyes but blinked them away. She whispered to herself that even though she never asked for this destiny, she would not let fear define her anymore. At last she reached the marked stone. Her knees were weak and her palms cold, but the pouch had not spilled. She placed it gently on the stone, closed her eyes, and whispered a silent hope that her presence would not bring harm to anyone. The elder lifted his staff and signaled for her to return. This time she walked faster, no longer afraid of the ground. When she reached the circle, the crowd remained silent, waiting for the elder's final sign. He opened the pouch carefully. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then the elder smiled softly, seeing that not even a grain was missing. He lifted the pouch for all to see. The silence broke into a wave of relieved voices. Some smiled, others sighed with respect. The rival tribe, however, looked unsettled by the result. Their leader stepped forward and challenged the meaning, saying anyone could have passed such a path by luck. The elder responded that luck did not guide steady steps on sacred ground, and only a clear heart could carry such a task. The rival leader stared hard, but one of his own older warriors spoke up, saying the signs were undeniable. The rival tribe stood quiet for a long moment before finally agreeing to respect the result. They mounted their horses and prepared to leave, though not without a cold final look. As they disappeared across the plains, the woman felt her legs give out with exhaustion. The warrior caught her before she fell, steadying her gently. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she saw peace in his eyes. He told her she had done more than anyone had expected, and she had walked with more courage than warriors who trained for years. The elder approached and told her that she now stood as a bridge between two worlds. She was free to choose her path. Whether she returned to her town or stayed among the tribe, no one would force her. He said the dream had come true not because she was captured, but because she walked with truth even when fear surrounded her. She felt tears form again. But this time they were filled with relief rather than panic. The warrior asked her what she wished to do. She looked toward the land that led back to her old life, remembering the fear that shaped so much of her world there. Then she looked at the camp, the distant children, the calm sky, and the man beside her who had given her safety without demanding anything in return. She told him she did not want to return to a place where fear spoke louder than truth. She wished to learn this new world instead, slowly, with respect. The warrior bowed his head slightly, accepting her choice not as a victory, but as a shared path. Days passed and the mood in the camp changed. People spoke to her more openly. Women taught her how to weave and grind herbs. Children began to follow her curiously, offering shy smiles. She learned not through orders, but through gentle guidance. She also learned the language little by little, understanding the meaning behind their songs and traditions. The warrior did not rush her or expect anything from her. He simply remained near enough to help, far enough to let her breathe. In time, she felt her fear fade like smoke in the breeze. The tribe no longer saw her as an outsider, but as someone chosen by fate, not through chains, but through courage. She understood that destiny was not a rope pulling her, but a path she could walk if she chose it. The warrior and she began to speak not as strangers, but as two souls, learning each other's hearts. Trust, the very thing he spoke of on her first night there, did not arrive suddenly. It grew like a small seed, watered by patience and guarded by hope. The elders saw harmony returning between the tribes and settlers. Small signs of peace began to appear. The prophecy, once heavy and unclear, became a reminder that even fear can lead to new understandings when hearts choose truth over hate. One evening, as the sun set in warm colors, she stood beside the warrior near the edge of the camp. Watching birds fly across the sky, she whispered that she no longer felt lost, and he answered that trust was reached not by force, but by walking the road together. She smiled, realizing that her journey had become more meaningful than any she had once imagined. The land that once frightened her now felt like home, not because she was placed there, but because she chose it. And deep inside, she understood the greatest truth the trial had shown her. Sometimes life leads us to places we never expected not to break us. but to reveal the strength we never knew we carried. That was the day she began her new life. Not as an outsider, not as a symbol, but as someone who learned that trust can turn strangers into family and destiny into peace.